Behind me is my recently acquired DeWalt 790, sometimes called the 7790 radial arm saw. It's a 12-inch saw, takes a 12-inch blade, and operates at 17 amps on 120, or it operates on 8.5 amps at 220. I've got it wired presently for 120 volts at 17 amps. So it should be quite a bit more powerful saw than my old Delta Super 990, which was 10 amps, and I used an 8-inch blade on it. So this will be my first thoughts and impressions. A few things. Actually, I haven't really found anything about the saw that I really don't like. The first thing I discovered was that I purchased the Super 990 because it had a hand crank down low that I could easily reach. I'm short, I'm only 5'6", and I was afraid that on the DeWalt saws with the crank on the top, I wouldn't be able to reach it. But as I find out, because it doesn't have the lower arm, the whole saw is about 5 inches lower. So I can pretty easily reach that crank, which on the DeWalt, let me disconnect this spring thing for a second. On the DeWalts, this thing to go up, I mean, it's almost effortless. And by the way, one complete revolution of the crank is 1/8 of an inch, as opposed to the old, or not the old, but the Delta, which one complete revolution is 1/16 of an inch. I find that handy. It's going to raise and lower the blade with less effort. In fact, in spite of the fact that this motor and arm and everything weighs a lot more than the 990, this is surprisingly, I mean, I can turn this with just 2 fingers. If I was 5'10" or 6 feet, that would be a dream. But I can reach it fairly easily. So far, that's a plus. I'm not put off like I thought I would be by the height of the crank in the back. This saw also came with this little gadget, which automatically returns the carriage back to the column. Yes, it does take a little bit more, it takes about double the effort to pull it out, but it's not bad. I was wondering if I'd want to use that or not. I think I probably will. It is really comforting to know that motor and blade is all the way back between cuts without me having to remember to put it there. That's a plus. It's the other thing. I've had this saw for a couple of months now, and I haven't bothered to do anything to it except move things around a little bit. In other words, operate some of the various clamps and tilt it and spin the motor and stuff around. But other than that, I haven't really fiddled with it except to go after it often. Every few days, I would spray every moving part, every screw, every Allen screw, every nut, every bolt that I thought I was going to have to deal with. I would spray it down with this, which is Liquid Wrench's idea of silicone spray, WD-40. WD-40 is not a lubricant. It's a temporary lubricant, but most things on this, you don't want oil. You just want it clean surfaces And WD-40 or silicone spray is a great cleaner. It dissolves grease and gunk and pitch and tar, all that kind of stuff that can build up over the years in a saw. This saw was made in 1971, by the way, so that's, I don't know how many years that is. That's 40 years ago. So when I got the saw, everything worked stiff. I thought, man, this is a turkey. This thing, I could hardly pull the carriage back and forth. My son was over the other day, and he says, Dad, you'll never get this thing. This thing is just hammered. And, well, I had only sprayed it. I hadn't really spent enough time moving things around at the same time of spraying it. I did spend a lot of time on the column, and I did get the column to raise up easy. But I hadn't spent any time on this. Look how easy that locks and unlocks. I mean, it's just effortless. And this clamps, there'll be more about that. But now, that, I had to hold the table in place and push on that arm when I started. Now, it just moves around sweet. Okay, bring this arrow to 0, tap it around a little bit, put this in, lock that. It's locked down at, well, we don't know that it's adjusted to 90 yet because we haven't got that far. That'll be another video. But the nice thing about these two, the DeWalts, once you've adjusted the 90, the 245s are automatic. Unlike the DeWalts where you adjust the 90 and then you have to adjust each 45 separately. I rather like that. I spent quite a bit of time, I'm going to take this spring off again. I spent quite a bit of time, an hour this afternoon. I took this front cover off. There's just 2 screws. And then I removed the yoke, motor, and guard and laid it out and took a rag and some WD-40 to the bearings that are in there that ride in ways inside the arm. And I WD-40'd. First I cleaned up all the exterior gunk. And those bearings were, 1 or 2 of them moved kind of easily, but 2 of them were just, one was really stiff and the other one was essentially froze up. It wasn't moving at all. Look, I repaired a lot of bicycles, and I can tell you that 99% of the time when you think you're having bearing problems, you just got old grease that turned the minerals, the liquid is all evaporated out of it, and you're left with this cakey stuff that is, I mean, it gets really hard. I mean, and the bearings go clunk, 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 clunk. Either that or they won't even spin at all. So I just cleaned all the exterior stuff off so I wouldn't wash any more junk inside the bearings, and then just repeatedly sprayed those bearings. There's a seal, but that seal is not so tight that WD-40 can't get in there, or in this case, silicone spray from Liquid Wrench. So I would spray it down and then work the bearing. And just keep working it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, spinning it, each one, until I got them all really freed up. Amazing. There was nothing wrong with those bearings at all. I got them completely freed up where they would spin. You just give them a spin and they'll spin right around. And then I used, because you can't, without taking them apart, you can't get grease in them. They come from the factory greased. So I just used Liquid Wrench machine oil. It's a light machine oil. Now, that's not going to last as long as grease. But this is not high speed like a bicycle or a car. This is moving very slowly. So I figure if I pull this head off of there about once a year, clean it just a little bit, and put, the exterior, you should do that anyway, and a couple more drops of liquid wrench on each bearing, and I'll be right back 100%. So that was an easy fix. And then this was just stiff as heck. I could not. What do I do? Now I'm stuck. What's the matter here? This thing. I slip a gear. I slipped a cog on that. Let me stop. Dang it. Well, what's happened is, well, okay, I couldn't get this to spin at all. This handle should move a little bit further this way. I couldn't get this to move at all. It was just froze up. And now it moves freely. There is underneath this, but in this yoke underneath here, there is a little spider that you lift and adjust to go over these notches that determine where this handle is going to be when it's tight and when it's loose. I've evidently slipped over one of the cogs because this handle should be tight. It was tight over here, and now it's tight here, and it won't loosen up all the way because it's hitting the yoke. So it's not as loose as it was an hour ago. I don't know when that happened, when that slipped a cog. Well, let's just see if I can fix it. You're supposed to be able to reach underneath that with a wrench. I see the thing. Let me see if I can. I should be able to. I see the little cogs. I don't want to loosen anything. There we go. Well, it slipped back, but it's fixable. I can fix that. It's not a problem. That worked. That wasn't working. This was very stiff, and now it's just effortlessly. But if I put that in between divots and crank this around, even though it's so easy to do, it locks it up very, very tight. Well, I guess I'm getting excited about this using this saw. I'm getting excited about having more horsepower, greater cut capacity. This will cut through a 4x4 or a 4x6. It'll cut 3 5/8 of an inch thick board, where my little Delta 900 with the 8-inch blade will cut 2 1/8. It'll cut 2 5/8 if I put the 9-inch blade on. And for 99% of what I'm going to do, that would be fine. But I do cut some 4x4s, and with the little Delta, I'd cut it, and as long as I got it against a stop, okay, cut one, flip it over, and cut the other. And if you got your saw adjusted properly, there's not going to be. It's going to be flush. Both those cuts are going to come together perfectly square and perfectly flush with one another. So that, you know, but it is nice to be able to cut all the way through in one pass. So I'm just getting started. As you can see, I put a new table on it that I built yesterday, and I built a stand for it a couple of days ago. I'll do a video on the stand, and I'll do a video on the table, and then we'll cover tuning up how the DeWalt adjusts for all the various settings, how you set the heel and how you set the blade square to the fence, and it's not going to be a lot different, than the Delta. Today, I adjusted the bearings, and those are up inside of, let me get this screwed around a little bit, and I adjusted the bearings that ride in ways that go the full length of the arm, one on each side. I did that when I pulled the motor off and cleaned the bearings. I cleaned the ways with some 4/0 steel wool and WD-40, and you want to be careful with that. You want to make sure you got the steel wool covering your fingers, because these corners are kind of sharp. But I've got those. They were stiff. I mean, not stiff. They had a little rust on them, surface rust, and they were very rough. And the saw just kind of ground as it went back and forth. It just crunchy. So I cleaned the bearings, oiled them, put them back in, and then adjusted them. They're very easy to adjust. You need a 1/2-inch wrench, an 1/8-inch Allen wrench, and a small crescent wrench. Now, the only thing you need the small crescent wrench for is that you're going to have a hard time getting enough leverage on these little Allen wrenches. But if you put a crescent wrench on them, then you got a little bit more leverage to turn things. That's the only thing you need that for. If you got strong enough fingers, you won't need that if you can hang on to that little thing and tighten and loosen an Allen screw. So to adjust these, there's a nut here on the right side. The manual says it's on the left. On the right side, there's a nut here in the front. There's a nut back here in the rear. Both those have to be loosened. There is an Allen screw right up in here, okay, that has to be loosened. There's another Allen screw right back here that has to be loosened. And those are steel Allen screws with brass tips that tighten against the threads of the bolt that holds the bearing. And that bearing is on an eccentric. So once you get the nuts loose, then there's another Allen screw on the bottom. All right. Now this requires, in order to get to those, you have to turn the motor. Boy, that worked so easy before that thing slicked the cog. You have to turn the motor clear around to here, because there are some holes in here that hit those. Well, I'm getting it wrong here now. Where are they? Oh, there. Okay, I got it backwards. You got to turn around this way. Okay. There's some holes, access holes, through which you can put the Allen wrench. And yeah, it's a little fiddly to get that Allen wrench in the end of that bolt. All right. At the end of that bolt is you tighten that bolt, and that spins the bearing around to where it's tight against the way. So you hold this very tight, as tight as you can hold it with your fingers. And then as you're holding it, tighten that nut, and then retighten the Allen screw, front and back. When you're finished adjusting, you move the saw, the motor and yoke across the carriage with your finger on that bearing. Be careful you don't get it pinched between the bearings. That can happen. Okay, and with all the force you can give it with your index finger, you should not be able to stop that bearing from spinning. If you can stop that bearing from spinning, you got them adjusted too loosely, and so they're pretty tight. They have to make full contact inside the ways, top and bottom. Those are convex bearings with a concave way, and if you're not making full contact, top and bottom, this thing can jiggle. Well, you know what kind of cut you're going to get if this thing's bouncing around on the ways. So, but as you can see, even adjusted tight, they move very freely once you get them oiled up and everything's clean. Can I think of anything else to say about this saw? We covered the crank, how stiff that was. I could hardly turn that crank when I first started. But judicious applications Let me move this out of the way. Judicious applications of repeatedly on this column. I think we can see it, yeah. Repeated applications of silicone spray on this column. Let it run down in there. It's going to carry all that gunk clear to the bottom. Run it down in there. Crank the arm down. Crank it up. Respray it. It's hard to get oil in there, but this stuff penetrates pretty well. Just keep spraying WD-40. Yeah, well, silicone spray. There's a crack back here that gets in there pretty far. Spray it. You know, just keep after it with the spray. The reason I'm saying this is because I don't think most of these saws are out of adjustment. You know, I don't think you need to adjust the column and all that stuff on most of these saws. I think they're just dirty. I think they've just been sitting for a long time. They got a little rust in there. I think if you just clean them up and get them moving, you can save yourself a lot of time. I mean, disassembling all that and readjusting it. There's no point in readjusting it if it's not all cleaned up and moving freely anyway. So I think you'll find if you get it moving freely that it won't be out of adjustment. So that's all I've got to say about the DeWalt 790 saw for today. Oh, well, no, it's not. One more thing. They got this in and out rip thing here that tells you approximately where you're at on the in rip and out rip. There's the in rip here, and there is the out rip down here. Well, on the back of this little plate, let me zoom in a little bit. Maybe we can see it a little closer. Okay, this is the thingamajigger. This is your scale for your in rip, and this is a scale for your out rip, and this knob locks the arm, or the carriage on the arm. You turn to the right to lock it, you turn it to the left to unlock it. So they had, behind this piece, they had about over a 1/16 of an inch thick piece of metal that was supposed to push against this. Well, you can't see it, it's not in there. It was supposed to push against the arm and kind of spread the force out. Well, first of all, it was a bad idea because it wore off the tops of all the numbers by sliding back and forth through there, because it was always in contact. There was no way to get it this steel here wasn't springy enough to cause it to spring away. And so even when you would loosen this up, this would still rub against that. I didn't like that. For one thing, it was irritating to hear that thing screeching as it went across there. So I took the two screws out right here, and you could see where this bolt had been hitting, where this bolt here had been hitting this. I took this off, took it over the drill press, and drilled a 3/8 inch hole in it, maybe 7/16. I guess it's 7/16. And now the bolt just goes through that piece of metal and right into here. And now, no noise. The numbers are all wore off anyway already, so that's a little trick you could do to you know, get rid of some grief that you don't need. So anyway, thanks for watching.